2. How to approach God with questions. And it shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Isaiah chapter 65, verse 24. A process for asking God. When you remember who you are, you realize you don't have to desperately beg God to hear you, laden with fear and worry that you may be unworthy of an answer. There may not be enough to go around, or God simply won't hear you. Like all couples and families, we have our challenging times when problems are coming at us quickly and issues seem to pop up left and right, complicating our business efforts, relationships, and the way we feel about our life purpose. In those times, our greatest gift is the awareness of who we truly are, apart from all the noise and goings-on of the world. We know that the Creator, who created the universe, also created us. Therefore, we are a part of Him, an individuated piece of God living in a body that He also created for us, in which to reside while we experience this earthly existence. Why would we ever have to plead, beg, and desperately seek God out in some faraway place? He's already inside us, waiting lovingly and patiently for us to remember, acknowledge, and ask. Every question we need answered is already answered. Every problem we need solved is already solved. The direction we need to take is already available. When we find our world getting a bit frenzied and we're feeling out of sorts, instead of getting frantic, upset, negative, and fearful, we know our best decision is to do exactly the opposite. Stop struggling, worrying, and distressing, and just get very, very quiet. We have a special comfortable place in our home for our prayer and meditation sessions. It's a lovely, comfortable spot in front of floor-to-ceiling windows where we're gazing at the natural beauty of the Sonoran Desert. The first thing we do is try to breathe more deeply and calm our bodies and our nervous systems, so they're better receptacles for God's wisdom and grace. Then we begin to put our focus on every positive thing in our lives, acknowledging every good that comes to our mind. And as we do so, we give thanks for each thing. As we continue this process, we feel our energy dramatically shifting. Instead of feeling the stress and tension we had when we started, we're feeling calm and present. We then become aware of a growing feeling of gratitude that deepens as we acknowledge more and more of our blessings. From our eyes that behold this beautiful world to the softness of our pillow as we lie down at night, we realize the importance of those small but valuable gifts we possess, which many people struggle without. At that point, we've changed our state of being from one of stress, lack, and confusion to one of deep gratitude and peace. And from that state, we deliberately remember who we are, that we are a creation of the Creator, that He dwells with us always, and if we ask Him, He reveals the truth, the answers, and sometimes the patience and confidence we need to journey forward more happily, knowing that nothing will be hidden as long as we ask and remember. One God and Father of all, who is above all and through all, and in you all. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 6. Two young actresses accepted an impossible mission and changed the world. Sarah O'Meara and Yvonne Feddersen. Two young Hollywood actresses, Sarah Buckner O'Meara and Yvonne Lime Feddersen, met playing the bubbly girlfriends of Ricky and David Nelson on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. Little did they know, it was a friendship that would last a lifetime, one in which they would change the world together. The year was 1959, and two rising stars, a stunning brunette and beautiful blonde, were picked from a possible cast of hundreds as part of a government-sponsored goodwill tour. They were flown to Korea, Okinawa, and Japan to entertain American soldiers stationed abroad after the Korean War. A few days after they arrived in Tokyo, the entire city was shut down by a severe typhoon with violent winds. Red flag alerts warned locals to remain indoors, though a few desperate souls scavenged through the debris and wreckage looking for food and shelter. Among these was a group of children huddled beneath a fallen awning, pressed together for warmth but still shivering against the freezing wind. The children were barefoot, clothed in rain-soaked rags and weeping. After days trapped in their hotel room, the willful and daring actresses grew restless and decided to sneak out for a midday walk. They did not want to miss all the sights and sounds of this fascinating new culture. Propelled by youthful curiosity, they explored the side streets of Tokyo and strode right into the cowering orphans. Turning onto the side street, giggling as their shoes sank into the mud, the young Hollywood actresses must have looked like angels emerged from the terrifying storm to the children. They immediately ran to the children and huddled as many as would fit under their billowing coats. Sarah and Yvonne furiously flipped through the pages of their English to Japanese dictionaries to converse as best they could. They discovered the little survivors were orphaned, stranded, and homeless. Sarah and Yvonne did what any naive, emotional young women might do and smuggled all 11 children into their hotel room. They bathed, fed, and played with the children before tucking them in for the night. After the children were fast asleep, Yvonne looked at Sarah with a worried expression. Now what? As they realized they needed to face the reality of the situation they had stumbled into. The next morning, Sarah and Yvonne searched for orphanages to take in the rescued children, but none could oblige because of their own crowded conditions. There was also the fact that because the children were mixed blood, half American and half Japanese, many fathered by American servicemen, they would receive no government funding. Neither country would accept the children because they had no birth certificates. At the time, they were called throwaway children, unclaimed by the cultures of their origin. They learned of a kind local woman named Kin Horuchi, lovingly known as Mama Kin, who lived in a one-room hut with several orphans. She agreed to care and provide shelter for the extra children, with the promise that Sarah and Yvonne would pay for these 11 orphans plus the 10 already in her care. They began their lifelong careers in fundraising by passing around a hat in the audience and collecting donations after singing to the servicemen. When our men in uniform learned about the children, they were eager to help. Sarah and Yvonne decided there was nothing left to do but start their own orphanage, International Orphans Incorporated. When word of what was happening spread through the city, there were over 100 extra children left on the doorstep of the modest dwelling within 3 short weeks. Mama Kin agreed to care for these extra children with Sarah and Yvonne's commitment of financial help. Once again, the soldiers stepped up to help, and the hut was expanded into a comfortable home for the children in Mama Kin's care. Sarah and Yvonne returned to California and started fundraising. They implored friends, family, and contacts in the film industry to help the children they had grown to love. They collected enough money to build 4 orphanages in Japan for the throwaway children, who were now safe and secure. Due to their great success, Congress later requested them to do the same in Vietnam. Eventually, the 2 women, along with volunteers, built and maintained 5 orphanages, a hospital, and a school. Through building orphanages with the dedicated oversight of the 3rd Marine Amphibious Force, Sarah and Yvonne became friends and dedicated partners with Marine Corps Lieutenant General Lewis W. Walt, who was in charge of their entire orphanage operation in Vietnam. After an event, General Walt, who appeared at many of their fundraisers, spoke with Sarah and Yvonne privately. Over coffee, he shared a history-changing secret. "Ladies, I have something to tell you, something that very few people know," he said in a hushed voice. "In a short time, I expect to receive orders from the President to pull our troops out of Vietnam." Sarah and Yvonne could not believe what they were hearing and immediately thought about their precious orphans. General Walt was tough, but was a teddy bear when it came to the protection of the little ones. Still, he was committed to the safety of his men. He held up his hands before the ladies could speak. "I'm telling you right now, I don't want to hear a word about the children. There's absolutely nothing I can do. Do you understand? It's going to be hard enough to evacuate our men, so I don't want any problems concerning the children. I've got enough to deal with, okay?" Sarah pleaded, her eyes filling with tears. You know these children will be the Viet Cong's first targets because the orphanages are funded by Americans, and the children are half American." Yvonne began to cry as well and begged. "They won't survive with their mixed blood. They will be lined up and shot, just like we see on TV." "There's nothing I can do," General Walt replied, clearly upset. "I'm sorry, but that's the way it is." Sarah and Yvonne wept most of the night, imagining the faces of the little children they had grown to care for as if they were part of their own families. In the morning, sadness was replaced by action. They called their ally, Representative James C. Corman, Democrat, California, and boldly requested that he persuade Congress to acquire the planes to evacuate the boys and girls in peril. Within 24 hours, the call from Congressman Corman came in. "If you can organize the children, I'll help get the planes." Sarah and Yvonne worked tirelessly for weeks, coordinated volunteers, and made miracles happen. The operation was dubbed by the media as Operation Baby Lift. Sarah and Yvonne cried tears of joy as the children were flown out of war-torn Vietnam and placed into the arms of loving adoptive parents. Through their orphanages, community efforts, and Operation Baby Lift, the Child Help founders began their philanthropic careers, rescuing thousands of babies and young children. Word quickly spread of the wonderful things Sarah and Yvonne were doing with International Orphans Incorporated, and they were invited by the First Lady of California, Nancy Reagan, to speak about their life-saving missions. Their heart-wrenching story would be the perfect way to address what Mrs. Reagan called America's best-kept secret: child abuse in the nation. Then Governor and First Lady Ronald and Nancy Reagan told Sarah and Yvonne they were the perfect ones to begin the fight against child abuse in America, for they were brave in their actions where angels fear to tread. Alerting the country of this horrible epidemic was the first step in helping the cause, and the ladies were eager to share the story of what was happening to American children. Later in the year, the Senate Subcommittee on Children and Youth released a study that child abuse had become an epidemic in the United States and was the leading cause of death in young children. This horrific statistic showed the intensity of the issue in our own country and helped to convince many to join the cause. Unfortunately, this statistic is still true today. After working endlessly in April 1978, Sarah and Yvonne opened the doors of the first pioneering residential treatment center for children traumatized by abuse. This month would later have national significance when they joined actress Sophia Loren to lobby President Jimmy Carter with the hopes of making April Child Abuse Prevention Month. Eventually, April was declared National Child Abuse Prevention Month in 1983 by President Reagan. To this day, it's a month during which organizations throughout America pay extra attention to this critical issue. The first children's village is located in Beaumont, California. This village treats severely abused children from ages 4 to 14 and gives them a safe place to call home with therapy and structure. Since then, other villages, advocacy centers, adoption centers, and foster care placement and training programs have been added in locations around the country. In 1982, the organization's name was changed to Child Help. Decades later, Child Help remains true to their vision. With prevention, intervention, and treatment programs in every state, this internationally respected nonprofit is the largest organization dedicated to helping victims of child abuse and neglect, as well as at-risk children. The Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline, 1-800-4-A-CHILD, operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and receives calls from throughout the United States, Canada, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Guam. The service is staffed exclusively with degreed counselors and is pioneering text-chat research to keep up with emerging technology so they can reach the greatest number of youth in need. Child Help has also been a leader in prevention education, launching Child Help Speak Up, Be Safe and Child Help Speak Up, Be Safe for Athletes to protect youth in schools and sports. Several of Child Help's programs were firsts and continue to be studied by professionals worldwide as models that work. The 60 years of successfully implementing best practices throughout the world has inspired Child Help's next bold vision to create the Child Help Global Campus to serve the entire world with the training and models perfected by Child Help. Every step of the way, wonderful volunteers, many of whom participate in Child Help chapters throughout the country, lend a helping hand. Though it has grown beyond their wildest dreams, founder, CEO, and chairman Sarah O'Meara and founder, vice chairman, and president Yvonne Feddersen, who still work every day for this critical cause, have never forgotten those 11 little orphans in a storm who inspired their mission of hope. Ask to find your purpose. Yvonne Feddersen's story. I definitely think the way you understand something, if you want things to work out in life, is that you have to learn to ask questions. It's a very important life skill. I was very inquisitive when I was young. I was very active in school and my church. I asked many questions and fortunately had people who answered them in a meaningful way that I could understand at that time. The questions I asked and the answers I was given, especially about spiritual matters, helped me to get on a spiritual path that has guided me my entire life. Even when I entered the film industry, I would always pray when I was going on an interview and ask if it was right for me to get the part. I wanted to feel good within myself if I was going to make a decision. I'm sure I made mistakes. Many of them I remember vividly, but you learn through those challenges. That's the beautiful part about life. As a young child, I was always a movie buff, and I would write to various famous stars and ask them for pictures, autographs, and things like that. I was always interested in that, but I never thought it was something I would be a part of. The amazing thing was, most of the stars answered my letters. It was really special to have those requests answered. One summer after graduation, my parents allowed me to go to the Pasadena Playhouse, which is a place many people go to learn how to act, but also to be discovered. They had one main stage and several smaller stages. Usually, family or friends would come to see actors perform if they got on one of the stages. I did plays in the smaller venues, but one day in class a man sitting next to me asked, "Would you go with me to read for main stage?" He was nervous to go alone, and we had connected, so I said, "Sure, I'll go with you." We were sitting in the audience at the main stage, and the director suddenly looked up at me and asked, "You, up there, would you please come down and read for this part?" I went down, read, and ended up getting the part. It was a famous play called Ah, Wilderness, with Will Rogers Jr. and Bobby Driscoll. Right after I got the part, several agents came up to me. They each said they would like to represent me if I did not have an agent. I thought that sounded like fun, so I said, "Okay." You had to be a card-carrying member in the union, and it was kind of tricky. I picked the agent who could get me in. Right away, I got a part on Father Knows Best with Robert Young and Jane Wyman. I only had one line, but right after that show, the producer said, "I'd like to have you as a regular," and I thought, oh my gosh, I ended up with a running part for 4 more years. My career started, and it just took off. I did some popular movies at the time, like Drag Strip Riot and High School Hellcats, as well as a few classics, like The Rainmaker with Katharine Hepburn and Loving You with Elvis. I also appeared in many TV shows like Father Knows Best, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, Gomer Pyle, Family Affair, and My Three Sons. I just would go from one show to another. I was very fortunate and blessed, but it all played a part in my future destiny. Sarah had come to California from Knoxville, Tennessee. We first got to know each other because we were both Sunday school teachers at the Hollywood Presbyterian Church. We were active in the Hollywood Christian group. In addition, I was involved with a group of actors who would do a show every weekend for the servicemen somewhere in the United States. The group was championed by an actor named Charles Watts. Charlie would get the older actors and actresses, and I would get the young ones, and we would entertain servicemen on the weekends. One day, when I was working on Ozzie and Harriet, Sarah was there working as well. I recognized her from the other places we'd run into each other. We started talking, and I invited her to be on the show for the troops the coming weekend. She thought it sounded like fun and said yes. We shared a room together that weekend and really started to get to know one another. We realized how close our beliefs and values were, and because of that we grew close very quickly. Shortly after we had gotten to know each other, she had to move out of the apartment where she was living and find another. I was living at home with my mother in Glendale. "It's a waste of time to drive so far to the studios," Sarah said to me. "Would you like to get an apartment together?" I knew it was a great idea, so we got an apartment in Hollywood. Through our work with the military, we learned that they were looking for 2 actresses to go overseas to entertain the servicemen. When we entertained at home in the U.S., the military paid only for bare basic accommodations. But overseas on this particular trip, they were going to have actors travel GS-16 class, which meant you would go first class all the way, as you had the same status as a general. When we got the information, we asked each other, why not try out? We each went on interviews 2 different days. They did not know we even knew each other, let alone that we were close friends. Miraculously, out of all the applicants, we were the 2 selected to go. We were told they had interviewed 500 young women for the assignment. When we got the phone calls, we looked at each other and said, there must be a reason that we were chosen, because this is just unbelievable. For us to be selected without them knowing how connected we are? My goodness, God must have had His hand on this. And of course, that's how we found the children we saved and ultimately started Child Help. You live life, and one thing leads to another. But sometimes, after you live a few years, you look back and realize all the pieces of the puzzle of your life come together. That one question that led to an answer that led to a complete pivot of your life and your purpose. It's all for a reason. It's truly incredible and amazing when you look back and you get it. Being Hollywood actresses is what brought it together for us, and we enjoyed those years in show business. During that time, we made a lot of friends, and it was fun, but it led to something bigger and better for our lives. Having been sent overseas to entertain, we found the orphan children. That was the thing that changed both of our lives completely. It changed what we are going to do forever. 60 years later, we're still rescuing boys and girls in need, and we've loved every minute of it. We've met so many wonderful people through our work. I think that if you really do something you love, you don't mind the time and energy you put into it. Some people ask us, don't you get tired? Aren't you going to retire? Just like every other question, the answer comes from our purpose-driven mission. We'll never retire because we feel so good about what we're doing. We know we're in our sweet spot, so this is where we belong. This is our mission for life. What's really beautiful is that it's become the mission of many of our volunteers as well. We have many volunteers who have been with us 30, 40, 50, or even 60 years. These volunteers are all over the country. They work so hard and raise millions of dollars every single year because they see how many children's lives they change for the better. There are so many children out there who need our help and our love to turn their lives around. It's just so sad when you see a child who arrived at one of our villages so scared, feeling like it's their fault. But it is so wonderful, such a good feeling, when you go back a few months later and see a huge difference after they've been living in the security of our villages. They learn how to live in a family-like environment, from setting the dining table and having a normal meal to having responsibilities and rewards for their achievements. Our pioneering animal program ranges from the skill building and caretaking of our equine therapy to the comfort a child feels in revealing his or her heart while cuddling a specially trained therapy dog. Often, they've been so violated by those who were supposed to care for them, including their own parents. In our non-denominational chapel, they learn about God, how valuable they are to Him, and how His love transcends all things. With all those positive possibilities available to them, they begin to heal, trust, and dream again. If you are purpose-driven, you come alive again every day. It's so vitally important to love what you're doing, and we do. I think if everyone would find something that they love to do, then they would never want to quit. When it comes to knowing the right way to keep asking the right questions that move you toward your purpose, there are some important things to keep in mind. You must get your ego out of the picture as much as possible and really focus on your purpose. In our case, we have to think of the children. We need to remember we're not asking for ourselves, we're asking for the children. They need us to ask because they have no voice. They're too young or too scared or beaten down to ask. We've had to learn that even though it's hard to seek donations, it must be done to support this critical cause for the children. When you are really sincere and speak from the heart, you'll learn to just put it out there, knowing you're doing it for God's little children. You're working for something so much bigger than yourself. I think people can feel when your request comes from a place of phoniness, or when you really mean it and it's sincere. We always ask with grace and gentleness. The most important thing always is to ask yourself and God to understand what your talent is and use it for something good, something that will bless you and others. When you know your mission, you never give up. Every time we started a new program for child help, it was a challenge, but with God's help, we withstood the storms and have received many beautiful miracles for the children we all love. To save the children, we never stopped asking. Sarah O'Meara story. I think about questions all the time. The most important questions I have asked forever are, what is my mission? And what does God really want me to do with my life? Most people, whether they know it or not, have that question in their hearts because we want to be guided. My question was always, please, will you show me, God, exactly what you would like for me to do? What your plan is for my life? Not my own plan, but yours. God, please show me that. One of the gifts that God gave me is courage. I'm an overcomer. It's important that we do not let the opposition of the world take charge of our lives. There are so many ways life pulls at you. People giving you advice, telling you what's best for you, and pushing you toward what they think you should be or do. In my life, I found that I've had to give up a sure thing sometimes to do the right thing. God gave me something that I would get nothing in return for except the joy of helping people. I know that was important for me to understand and accept as my work for the children grew, because we've helped so many children now. There are many of those children whom we will never meet. We may never look them in the eyes and receive their gratitude, but that's where His guidance to do it for the joy of giving, not for our own glory, has been a pillar for both Yvonne and me to hold on to. We know we're working for the children and God, not for our own praise or power. We are all God's children. Questions really matter in life. If you question yourself asking, am I on the right path? Which is the path that God wants me to be on? You're likely to get important answers that are tied to your highest destiny. Sometimes you get a big calling, something so much bigger than yourself, like the one Yvonne and I took on. When you answer the call, often you're going to find yourself in a spiritual battle with opposition and ego. You can't let yourself be worn out by that. You have to go forward and just do what you know you've been guided to do and put your total reliance on God. I believe that every battle worth fighting is a spiritual battle between what you're destined to do and the things that get in the way of that. We all are faced with that in our lives. We have decisions to make, and making those decisions raises questions in our mind. Questions like, am I doing the right thing? Is this my mission? Am I doing it in a humble way or not? Am I doing it only to please myself or to please God? I think we have to be fearless and graceful about that. It's really important to ask ourselves questions all the time. In fact, I think the most important ones for us to ask are the questions we have within ourselves. When we get answers from the Holy Spirit, that's the highest answer, and that's available for anyone. You just need to know and believe that God is always there to guide you. You learn to get secure when you get that direction, trust it, and walk through it. It may look crazy to other people, but that's when you have to adhere to your guidance. We had so many naysayers along the way, people who told us, you can't do that, return those children to where you found them. You'll never find a home for them. You can't build orphanages in another country. You'll never get support for this. You cannot solve the problem of child abuse. It's too hidden. It's too big. I'm glad we tuned out those voices and followed what we knew was our divine mission. We have helped save over 10 million children from the darkness of child abuse and neglect, and we're working to bring in funding for the largest child protection project ever, called Child Help Global Campus. We will have all of our 60 years of best practices there, but it will be like an entire city where a child can come at birth and stay through emancipation if they need to. All parts of the ecosystem of prevention, healing, and therapy will come together to keep children safe. We will have an international training center to share best practices with every state, city, and country in the world. This is how we can reach all children and keep them safe from abuse. Looking back, I know we found the answers to our questions from the right source. Had we relied upon the many naysayers throughout our lives, none of these miracles could have happened. In our 60 years of running our organization, we've had many times when asking an important question meant literally everything to us and our survival. One specific time that stands out so dramatically in my mind is when the housing market crashed. The economy and every business imaginable was struggling to stay afloat. The donations to Child Help slowed enormously. Everyone was economically burdened. We were up against a wall and were just an hour away from closing our doors because we couldn't meet payroll. We had to ask one of the hardest questions ever, and we had to ask it of someone we did not even know. It was a friend of a friend, and we asked if she would give us the funding just to see us through. We needed $1 million, and we had to have it in an hour. We had met the daughter of the woman at a spiritual conference a few months earlier, and she had mentioned that they had a foundation that might fit with our mission. It was a small foundation, and the mother was in charge of it. She had never met us, and it took a lot of courage to get on the phone with her and talk about our desperate predicament. After hearing us out, she said, "Well, our foundation couldn't give you the money that quickly even if we wanted to, because we couldn't get together to vote. We don't have the time. I'd have to do it personally. If my daughter will give $500,000, I'll give the other $500,000. How do I get it to you? I could wire it." She wired the money within the hour. If we had not been bold and courageous enough to ask that question at our most desperate hour, Child Help was in danger of not surviving. I think of where that would have left all the children we serve. That was a very hard question to ask, especially of someone we didn't even know. That she said yes to our desperate request is truly incredible. It's an amazing example of how important it is and how much courage it takes to ask hard questions. Another question that was a hard one for me was one I asked of the late actor Merv Griffin. I asked him if he would consider giving us his resort, a dude ranch, in order for us to make it into a residential facility for abused children, because we really needed one. To our delight and surprise, he said yes. But his answer was even better than that. He not only gave us the ranch, he gave us the horses, the equipment, and every single thing on his guest ranch down to the dishes. He just walked out of a 5-star resort in order to give us the whole thing. Had we not been strong enough to ask him, we may never have had that. It was amazing. The point is, you have to get over your fear of asking and stay focused on the things you've been given to do in this lifetime. One thing I've learned through the years is that you have to be smart enough before you ask the question to think about how you're going to ask your questions. It's the wisest thing to do because sometimes when you ask people questions that may be a little bit personal, intrusive, or uncomfortable, you have to pray that you'll do it in a certain way that won't embarrass them or you. Each and every time you ask, you have to be cognizant of the question you're asking and ask it so artfully and gracefully that they say yes. I don't have a doubt that Child Help will grow and flourish for decades to come because God's hand is upon it. Child Help belongs to Him. God is the real chairman of the board, and we are honored to play a part in healing His most vulnerable children so they may grow up safe and secure, inspired to ask their own questions and find the answers within their hearts. Your role in the history of the world. No matter what, each person on Earth plays a role in the history of the world. Normally, we don't know what that is, so ask what your role is in the history of the world. Open your heart to the questions that create the path to your destiny, purpose, and fulfillment of your life. Judge a man by his questions rather than his answers. Voltaire. Ask Gold Nuggets. What is your mission, and what does God really want you to do with your life? Is your mission driven with a higher purpose? Are you doing the right thing? Are you doing it in a humble way or not? Are you doing it only to please yourself or to please God? Are you willing to overcome life's storms and challenges? Are you courageous enough to ask the hard questions?